So I got some breaking news, some global breaking news to report. Some people love Jollibees so much that they wouldn't even give the leftovers to their friends and family. They would throw it in the trash and then make them reuse it and eat it. That's why you've been seeing a lot of earthquakes happen. They've been shaking the foundation of engineering just because of group economics. And if a store is profitable and has profits, you could definitely donate to the community. So we don't want to cause this activity everywhere, but we tend to see it in a lot of places. So when engineers build, it's almost like hydraulic systems sometimes, and it can displace a lot of things, the engineers who have to build these things, especially if there's one engineer who knows more than the others. When group economics isn't seen, then you see like one whole place or one whole building just shaking like this. Very spooky behavior when the earthquake is only one building, but everything else around it is good. Very spooky behavior. That spooky behavior that happens in buildings like an earthquake, that only happens in one building or another, it leads to another thing a lot of the time. Like the movie with the walkers. Because they had enough resources and opportunities and money that they didn't use it, and not even the people who could use it were able to use it. Then you see an earthquake that happens in one place or another place. You know how crazy that is in engineering when the community has to be built? So it only happens in a certain store. It only might happen in a certain restaurant, where you see the hydraulic system act like the fun park or the fun building in a circus or in a fair, like a carnival, where they have the fun building that you walk through and the whole thing starts shaking. Some places have that built into it just because the group economics has enough economics to fund one person or even the boss or even get to the community the correct way. So now you've been seeing a lot of engineering systems like the circus or the theme park or the carnival fair, where you walk through one of the fun houses and it just moves like that. That's engineering used to then having to rebuild and also think about the group economics within the building. So in the fun house, when you walk through, you see all kinds of things just happening, like the fair. So you walk through, you start shaking, you start seeing things spin, you start seeing like you gotta hold on for a second. That's what been happening in a lot of countries in engineering, when the return on investment then doesn't help the community, or they then have to get the food out of the trash for all of the people who are starving, or people within the building raise the prices higher than expected. So when people take control over signing the pricing, the signing sheets and the pricing, and the community cannot even afford it, and even the one person who's able to do that is not profiting or helping, they turn the whole thing into a fun house. Now you see earthquakes happening in only one part of neighborhood that could help everybody else, or the store that's big enough and has a cheap enough food supply, but then they're throwing it away in the trash can, eat from the trash can instead of just delivering the leftovers. Then the whole thing turns into a movie funhouse where everybody start holding on and screaming in a single restaurant or building, when it doesn't need to be like that, because everybody else around them could use the resource, or even if they deny services. So if you are a business and you deny services too much, they then turn the entire business engineering into a theme park roller coaster where you gotta hold on. You're like scared out of your mind. But only thing, this is people with more resources. Then what happens is too, like the show, everybody who's not getting help medically, right, from um the medics, the doctors, even the lawyers, who all make more money. Then you see the walkers run to the building. So the walkers, if their workplace is not funding them enough, and then they don't get insurance and aren't able to be helped because they're not actually helping the people, but then there's people that make way more money, the whole place turns into a theme park or a fun house. I don't know if you guys heard about this, but I had to break it down professionally, because people who live on certain locations or certain cities have more than enough resources to be shared. So like my bank, right? My bank is supposed to be able to pay me enough where that even I could have resources, not zero. Then you see people's houses, or even certain banks or restaurants, the people that have to walk out or get denied service, even from hospitals, then they turn into walkers and they run fast. They run so fast into the store or the building or people's houses that it's spooky. That's the craziest thing I have to break down, because group economics within communities and corporations, the CC, communities and corporations, is able to get to the rest of the community for people that are in need or in help. So then when certain people only help the wrong people, or the people that have already more money, you see the engineering within the square radius shift and turn into a spooky funhouse, and everybody gotta hold on. That doesn't discredit, tornadoes. It doesn't discredit tidal waves. It doesn't discredit natural disasters, right? But when the community has to eat, and then the place of work has enough resources, the people turn into walkers that then have to leave, or they have health issues, or then you see the complete establishment. So if one person then acts of ego and takes all of the money, then the engineers can act spooky and then have new people have to work. And new people then have to work in the same place, and they have to fix it up again. They have to not be racist again. They cannot then discriminate. They cannot discredit. So communities, that can help people, sometimes look spooky in reverse. That's look like natural disasters as well. So don't discredit, because there's natural disasters everywhere, right? There's tornadoes, there's rain, there's too much sun, there's pollution, there's tidal waves, tsunamis, tornadoes, hurricanes. But then sometimes it happens specifically only within a certain workplace, to then show that everybody who already were working there, that then took too much of the, the money. Then you see natural disasters happen that aren't natural. That's the paranormal, not natural disasters. And then it looks crazy because if you make everybody eat from the dumpster at the place because you throw the food out, you could have already had it delivered. You could have had it on the side. You could have put it on the tray tables instead of behaving of that act. Especially once you make that much money, you should already know better. Especially if you then have more money than everybody else in the business, or a few people were taking most of the community's money or even the corporation's money. So when certain people in the community take so much, or it's a corporation that takes too much, then you see paranormal, supernatural activities happen within the radius to all of the people who live in that district, which is usually just a square block. It's a square foot, and then the whole thing turns into a fun house where they're still safe, or the community is still safe, but then you see everybody got a hold on. They're running around not knowing what's happening, but all it was unequal distribution and not having group economics, or then causing the things we don't want to see, which is racism, discrimination, or anything else. That's why it's important to give out sponsorships, to give out free food, to help people eat in the communities, to give out funding, and to have corporations move in good faith and best interest of the people, because there's enough resources and food that then get distributed even in the wrong places. So that some people get to retire early on good faith or by best interest, but then other people, like certain lawyers and other things, make so much money and don't even go in favor of their current client. Then you see supernatural funhouse activity, everything shaking around, everything spinning, everything moving differently, and then people thinking there's ghosts instead. They think there's ghosts, they think there's zombies, but then that's just the professionals like the medics, the lawyers, and the bankers looking at people through the racist eye. So then when you watch the movie with the walkers in it, that's everybody that can help somebody, right? But they look through a different lens instead of providing them money, resources, and care, especially care in the communities or corporations with constant cash. So many times the state gives money to certain corporations and businesses, but then they create unequal distribution and it doesn't get to the community, the right people, even within the places they can go. So then sometimes you see somebody that's of different ethnicity, right? Somebody that's different ethnicity broadcasting, saying the opposite of what people need. It might be a smaller store, it might be a bodega, it might be the first place that offers cannabis or vapes, right? Then you see the white person. I cannot be racist, but you see the person with more resources then using a camera illegally on the business. So some people, they just smile about it and they know that they're discriminating on the business, but it's people that actually need help from those businesses that can walk in. Then you see like the news station that discriminate against it instead. So then they start saying it's illegal, then the vapes are illegal, or the cannabis, whoever has it, is illegal. That's people that have live media that operate in the wrong direction. And then their businesses turn into the funhouse theme park. And then you see everybody that's like walkers in a movie start running to them. Then you see them running the buildings. You see them take everything. You see them with health issues. And then they take everything because there's certain people who then discriminate against the individuals who need it. That's like when I went to the dispensary, Maui Grown Dispensary. But then the person was a police officer when I said, "Are your cameras on?" before they came to my house. I said, "Is that camera on right there?" Then they probably lied. But then when I go to the dispensary, the same white person is in the dispensary, but then causing racist behavior instead of giving him, which is Joshua Elijah Ford, a sponsorship. Because if you get enough flowers, but you kick out the patient with health issues, they can then turn zombie-like, right? Because you have more than enough resources, but then you see people within the building taking the resources or then selling it instead of offering the sponsorship to the person they discriminated or were racist against. But then they try to kick those people out instead. So then they walk into a series of unfortunate events. The series of unfortunate events is to train them and also say, why would you discriminate against somebody with less illegally to just hold them back, especially if you had control of the camera system? So I'm not about to say that everybody that works or whatever is control of a camera system, but some people are in power or authority by making more money that have to have a camera on them to watch the behavior that they then show. So if this is police or security, or even there's somebody who is police or security and then acts differently once they get into the new job, like in a dispensary. So if the police was a Caucasian person who I asked all three of them, "Do you guys have your cameras on?" Then they walk to my door, but then they don't provide assistance instead of actually helping and providing the person with economic disparities assistance. Then they go to the next business and they think the camera is also on, but then they act racist or discriminate illegally against the person, and they try to sell the products to the outside instead of helping the patient who would walk inside. So then once the patient could walk inside, you were supposed to give them what? Sponsorship deals, extra products, the provided assistance or help. But then the person who acts like they're security and police and then works in the dispensary, but if they kick somebody out, discriminate, or act racist while they come from a different state, they walk into a series of unfortunate events. This doesn't actually help the community or even the one person that might have been in best interest or good faith of the dispensary, of the people with cannabis, CBD, THC. So then if you act racist to somebody who even has different features than you, different hair than you, different skin color than you, and you also had a camera on your body, a body camera that sometimes resembles like a GoPro, but you act illegally to not show it. So if you walk into the wall, right? If you walk to the wall and you don't show the camera footage because it's closed by the wall, or then if you turn to the side, you're not acting in good faith or best interest of the person who was supposed to get help. So then that also is what happened at the dispensary to Joshua Elijah Ford, which was already one of the first people, right? He's still welcome later on, but then if you act like there's no grace period for somebody who has economic disparities or that actually needed your help through best interest, even through donation, sponsorship, or even knowing that you have more than enough products than to overcharge, right? That's when everybody can sometimes see this happen, or it's unforeseen because they hide their body camera footage, but then they try to act racist at the person's house and then also in the business establishment. That's when people who needed help opportunities that could walk sometimes run into the building, sometimes steal everything, or sometimes cause unfortunate events to the people who did this, which is the police, even the security, that then don't check on me by providing the resources, but then creating a pricing gap by pricing out the people who cannot afford it. So you're supposed to provide sponsorship deals, free product, samples, and even donations to Joshua Elijah Ford instead of act in power or authority and then have him not able to walk into the business or the corporation or even First Hawaiian Bank. So then there's cameras all over First Hawaiian Bank. There's body cameras all over the police officers. And then they act in denial or like the cameras couldn't see this activity. This is when you see a lot of people that sometimes are Caucasian. That's not if somebody is actually taking care of somebody else who isn't, right? But then you lie against the cameras instead of what had happened. So then when I walk into the banking establishment or the dispensary, they even say he was smoking too much vape, or the hospital acts like you could create an explosion with a vape, which is condensation in the air that's not actually flammable. This is why back in the days, people could smoke cigarettes. They could smoke cigarettes in airplanes, on trains. They could smoke cigarettes at the malls because that's not even enough to be flammable to then cause denial or to deny somebody in public. So if this is a public figure and you deny them in public or the corporation or business, sometimes you see everybody else go homeless, but that shouldn't happen before the person gets paid. So the person who needs help economically already could get sponsorship deals, could get free product, could get donations, and at any time could get a reduction in cost. So they have the pricing power to reduce the cost to help somebody who's a public figure or even has less economics. But then you try to overcharge them, you lie on camera, and then if you act like you're policing, especially cross borders in a different state, and then you happen to work at the dispensary or the bank, but you are of a different skin tone enough to behave racistly. You cannot sometimes do this in your own apartment, but then sometimes that's also seen as well. But then that's management too, right? That's like Wendy and Leilani, who are Luana Gardens management, that then if they know that the oldest son has economic disparity due to flagrant foul or of financial interference. Flagrant foul is FNF, financial interference is FI, but you cannot behave this way in the community. We sometimes see Asians or white people behave this way, and then they act clueless, right? They try to act clueless with dementia or delusion instead of actually helping the correct person who needs help. Very, very wild topic because you could act in best interest. You might have actually even talked to this person before, but then that's when you see Maui grown in Kahului, Hawaii, Maui. That's the dispensary, act out of best interest when they could help the person who showed up first. So if there's a grand opening and Josh Ford shows up first, you're not able to then act racist or even deny service, or even have a grace period for somebody who needs accommodations. If you deny service, don't help with accommodations, or even deny a grace period, who medically has to go to the dispensary, right? Because that helps their health, or that has to have accommodations and ask for assistance in a bank, but they all wear body cameras or their security monitors, but you don't tell the truth. This is when a lot of unfortunate events happen, because you could have sponsored them, you could have paid them like one of the other employees, even if they don't go to work. You could have even helped them with the extra product that was product left on hand, right? That's like when you have a P&L. So a P&L is when you have a net loss. So the product net loss, because you still have it on hand, but then you would have been able to donate it to the correct person who already was there in the establishment, or you could have not acted out of best interest. So you could have still provided service and even affordable costs. This is when you see your paychecks decrease, you see certain people go homeless, because they had enough money to provide resources to the one individual or multiple that could have had the help, especially in the health field, right? So police are supposed to provide service, banking industries are supposed to provide service, and then when it's in the medical field, like a dispensary that can help somebody's health, you're supposed to provide service at a lower cost, not at a higher cost, and then not deny service. This is why you see the person who worked at the dispensary who even came from a different state, because then their skin tone wasn't able to get sunlight, right? So this is when you see some people who are different skin tone, even lighter, they go out in the sun, they help people, right? They even get sunburned. But some people cross state lines, then they work in the bank or the dispensary or policing or security. Then they change their name, or they even lie on the person that goes to them or walks to them in good faith and best interest. This is when you see a lot of interesting things happen to the people who actually have more resources, that then hold it against the person who needs it instead of providing service and help. Shout out to my real ones who logged in. You know, I always need more money. I always need more constant cash. I always need more flowers, CBD, and actual help, indica. And then we sometimes see people try to financially interfere or even steal the products before the people who are the ones that walk in and could need it. So then you price them out, or you deny service, or you act like there is no grace for the people who need accommodations. These are all illegally activities, all illegal activities, even in a court of law. So then even my attorney, who is a different skin color, writes an email and doesn't send the checks the proper way, or even then takes more money than necessary and denies service. This is called racism, discrimination, sexism, and then you're not providing the correct service for the people who need it, which could then even have you have a raise, or even then work at the next establishment that could be open. So sometimes these people like to act like they're louder, they're in more power. Sometimes they like to act as if they're of authority. That's even the chief of police, who already spoke to Joshua Elijah Ford, but then didn't provide his cash capital or even the checks that were supposed to be delivered after you use a camera or before you use a camera. This is all illegal activity. And once it's actually spoken about, before you even address a public apology with the money delivered, then even Luana Gardens, Leilani, and Wendy, as well as Cindy Sanchez, all become racist Asians because they have a different blood or different skin tone that allows them to have opportunities or resources, but then they act in denial of the person who could actually use it, and they actually know where the person lives as well. So people who are management in the community, they already know where people of economic disparity live, especially if they walk there on camera, if they use the body camera, and then sometimes they like to put their hand in front of it, like talk like a walkie-talkie like this with their hand in front of it. That's a interference. And then more money and checks, cashier's checks, even flowers and cannabis are then supposed to be delivered, and even help in medical institutions are supposed to actually provide more service and even then funding. If the security kick out somebody from the hospital, while there's cameras in the emergency room or the hospital, or then if certain people cross industries, become bankers that are either security, that are hospital, or then even go to a dispensary, but then act out of best interest or good faith. This is not condoned in the community, especially against Joshua Elijah Ford, because I happen to look different and I happen to have medical history that's already documented. You cannot then tamper with the documents or the cameras or even lie. Many people do this behavior for no reason. And then more money is supposed to be provided automatically, which is in cash, which is in checks, or which is in restitution settlements, and then even provided in his bank. It can even be Visa cards, credit cards that are operated in good faith for the person instead of against them. So they would indeed get sponsorship deals and they wouldn't have their services denied, as well as donations and pricing cuts instead of pricing increases. This is group economics and how you help the community by best interest and actually help